didn't just leave her in Italy, he erased her existence in a single morning. At dawn, Courtney Ramirez stood on a cold stone street with an empty suitcase, a dead phone, and no passport. Every bank card declined. Every account locked. The hotel clerk wouldn't return her documents because her bill had been reversed overnight. Across the street, Ethan Cole Wright slid into a waiting car, his hand wrapped around Vanessa Blake's wrist, not once looking back. "You'll figure it out," he said flatly. "I'm done." What he didn't see was Courtney's hand tightening around a thin envelope she hadn't opened yet. On the corner, a stamped line caught the light beneficiary update confirmed. 3 days later, the man who abandoned her would realize he hadn't escaped with everything. He had triggered his own collapse. Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from and your local time in the comments, and if stories of quiet strength and earned justice speak to you. Subscribe to the channel, you won't want to miss what comes next. Courtney Ramirez believed the trip to Italy was a beginning, or at least a pause long enough to breathe. For months, her marriage to Ethan Cole Wright had felt like standing beside a speeding train, close enough to feel the heat too far to stop it. Ethan's company was scaling fast. Investors called at all hours. Decisions were made without her. Dinners were postponed. Apologies became transactional. Still, when Ethan suggested Italy, just us, no phones, no pressure, Courtney let herself believe it meant something. She packed lightly. He insisted. "We'll buy whatever we need there," he'd said, smiling already half gone. The first days were almost convincing. They walked narrow streets, washed in gold afternoon light. Ethan held her hand in public, kissed her cheek at cafes, ordered wine he claimed to remember she liked. Courtney noticed how he positioned himself between her and other people, how he answered questions directed at her. She told herself it was stress. She told herself marriages bent under pressure and didn't always break. Vanessa Blake arrived on the second evening. Ethan introduced her casually as if she were luggage that had always been there. "Strategic communications," he said. "She's flying in for a few meetings." Vanessa's smile was polished and cool, her eyes assessing. She spoke to Courtney warmly, but never looked at her for long. Every sentence curved back toward Ethan. Courtney felt it then, a quiet displacement, like a chair pulled slightly away from the table. The hotel suite was immaculate, expensive, controlled. Ethan chose it. He chose the reservations, the transport, the itinerary. Courtney didn't ask questions. Not because she was naive, but because asking had become a negotiation, and she was tired of bargaining for basic information. That night, while Ethan showered, Courtney glanced at his phone on the nightstand. She hadn't meant to. A notification lit the screen. Access updated. Effective immediately. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Her chest tightened anyway. Later over dinner, she asked carefully, "Are we okay?" Ethan smiled the way he did in boardrooms. Calm, reassuring, final. "We're fine. You're just overwhelmed. Try to enjoy yourself." Vanessa excused herself early, claiming jet lag. Ethan ordered another bottle of wine. He talked about the future in broad strokes: expansion, exits, freedom. Courtney listened for herself in the sentences and didn't hear her name. The next day, Ethan suggested a change of plans. "There's some paperwork I need to wrap up," he said over breakfast. "Boring stuff, insurance, tax forms tied to the trip. Just signatures." Courtney frowned. "Here it's easier abroad. Fewer delays." He slid a thin folder across the table. Nothing complicated. She scanned the pages. Dense language. Clauses stacked like bricks. Ethan leaned back unbothered. Vanessa hovered nearby, scrolling on her tablet. "Can I read this later?" Courtney asked. Ethan's smile thinned. "We're on a schedule." Courtney hesitated. She hated that feeling, the subtle pressure that made her doubt her instincts. She signed where he pointed. Once, twice, 3 times. Minutes later, her phone buzzed. "Your access has been changed." She looked up. Ethan was already standing, slipping on his jacket. "I need to step out," he said. "Meetings." "Ethan," she said. What did I just sign? He kissed her forehead. You worry too much. That was the last moment he touched her as a husband. The morning he left, Courtney woke to silence. His side of the bed was cold, the closet half empty. Her phone had no signal. When she went downstairs, the hotel manager, Marco, met her with a practiced, uncomfortable smile. There seems to be an issue with your reservation, he said. Payment was reversed overnight. That's impossible, Courtney replied. My husband, your cards? Marco asked gently. They declined, every one. At the desk, Elena watched with concern as Courtney tried again, then again. The system rejected her. When Courtney asked for her passport, Marco hesitated. Until the balance is resolved, he said, I can't release it. Courtney stepped outside to call Ethan. He answered on the third ring. His voice was flat. I can't talk, he said. You left, Courtney said. She kept her voice steady. My accounts are locked. The hotel has my passport. That's not my problem anymore, Ethan replied. You'll figure it out. She heard Vanessa in the background laughing softly. I'm done, Ethan said, and hung up. Courtney stood there long after the call ended. She didn't scream. She didn't chase the car when it pulled away. She watched the taillights disappear, and something in her settled. Survival, not shock. Inside, Elena offered her a charger. Marco brought water. Officer Alessandro Moretti arrived later to take a report abandonment, suspected fraud improper, withholding of documents. He was professional, careful. He didn't promise miracles. Document everything he said, every call, every signature, every timestamp. That evening, alone in the room, she wasn't sure she could keep. Courtney opened her bag and found the thin envelope she'd ignored for days. It had arrived before the trip, buried under travel confirmations. She opened it slowly. Beneficiary update confirmed. Her name, clear, undeniable. Courtney sat on the edge of the bed and read it twice. Then a third time. Ethan hadn't known. He'd moved too fast. He'd assumed control meant ownership. She closed the envelope and placed it carefully back in her bag. Outside, church bells rang the hour. Courtney exhaled, not in relief, but in resolve. She was stranded, yes. But she was not powerless. The night before everything collapsed had been designed to look perfect. Candlelight flickered against stone walls. The restaurant overlooked a narrow canal water, moving slow and dark beneath the bridge. Ethan had chosen the place himself, quiet, exclusive, expensive, in a way meant to signal intention. Courtney noticed how he scanned the room when they arrived, measuring who might recognize him, who might matter later. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes after them. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said smoothly, already pulling out a chair. She wore confidence like a tailored jacket, not loud, not apologetic. Ethan didn't object. He waved her in as if she belonged there, as if Courtney were the guest. Dinner unfolded with precision. Ethan talked, and Vanessa filled in gaps. Courtney listened. Every sentence curved away from her toward futures she wasn't invited to inhabit. When she asked a question, Ethan answered vaguely. When she pressed, he smiled and deflected. You don't need to worry about the details, he said at one point, slicing into his steak. That's my job. Courtney set down her fork. We're married. Details affect me. Vanessa glanced up, amused. Ethan didn't look annoyed. He looked patient. That's exactly why I handle them, he replied. So you don't have to carry the stress. Stress. The word landed wrong. Courtney took a breath. Then explain why my phone keeps logging me out of our bank app. The table went quiet. Ethan leaned back in his chair. It's a security update. Temporary. Vanessa nodded without being asked. Happens all the time. Courtney held Ethan's gaze. You didn't mention it. You didn't ask, he said evenly. She let it go. Not because she believed him, but because she was collecting something else now. Patterns, timing, tone. After dessert, Ethan suggested a walk. Vanessa declined, claiming fatigue. She smiled at Courtney on her way out, her expression almost kind. You're lucky, Vanessa said. He works so hard for you. Courtney watched her leave and wondered who that statement was meant for. Later, back at the hotel, Ethan pulled a slim folder from his bag. Just need a few signatures, he said casually. Trip-related. Insurance liability, that kind of thing. Courtney took the papers. Dense paragraphs. Legal phrasing. Her name printed cleanly at the top. She scanned for keywords ownership transfer authorization. The language was slippery, designed to reassure while obscuring. Why here, she asked. Because we're here, Ethan replied, and because it's efficient. Courtney hesitated. I'd like to read this properly. Ethan checked his watch. We don't have time. The silence stretched. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. Everything okay? Ethan smiled. Just logistics. Courtney felt the pressure then, not overt but deliberate. A narrowing of options. Sign and move on. Question and become the problem. She signed. Once, twice, 3 times. Minutes later, her phone vibrated. Security alert access permissions updated. Her stomach dropped. What did I just authorize? Courtney asked. Ethan kissed her forehead, already stepping away. Go to sleep. We have an early morning. She didn't sleep. At 4:17 a.m., she woke to the sound of a zipper. Ethan's silhouette moved quietly through the room. She pretended to sleep, watching through half-lowered lashes as he gathered his things with methodical calm. No hesitation, no second thoughts. He didn't wake her. By the time the sun rose, he was gone. The first card declined at the cafe across the street, the second at the hotel desk, the third when she tried to book a ride. Marco's expression shifted from polite to concerned. Elena's hands paused over the keyboard. I'm sorry, Elena said softly. It's saying payment was reversed. Courtney asked for her passport. Marco hesitated. Until the account is settled, he said, I can't release it. That was when Courtney understood the scale of what had happened. Not an argument, not a mistake, a plan. She stepped outside and called Ethan. He answered on the 3rd ring. I can't talk, he said. You left me here, Courtney said. She kept her voice even. My money is gone. The hotel has my passport. There was a pause, then a sigh. You'll figure it out, Ethan replied. I've already moved on. She heard a second voice. Vanessa's. Close. Intimate. I'm done, Ethan said, and hung up. Courtney stood there, phone in hand, watching the street fill with morning light. People passed her. Lives continued. The world didn't pause for abandonment. Inside, Marco offered water. Elena brought a charger. Officer Alessandro Moretti arrived later, his questions precise, his tone neutral. Do you believe this was intentional? He asked. Yes, Courtney said. And documented. He nodded. Then we start there. That evening, alone in the room, she wasn't sure she could afford. Courtney opened her bag and found the thin envelope she'd ignored since before the trip. It had seemed unimportant then. Just another piece of mail. She opened it now. Beneficiary update confirmed. Her name stood alone on the page. Clean, official. Courtney read it twice. Then again, Ethan had moved fast. Too fast. He'd assumed control meant ownership. He'd assumed silence meant ignorance. She folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Outside, the city settled into night. Courtney sat on the edge of the bed, not crying, not shaking, just breathing. She was stranded, but she was not erased. By the second morning, the hotel lobby felt like a courtroom with no judge. Courtney Ramirez stood at the front desk, while the world moved behind her, tourists wheeling suitcases, staff gliding past with practiced smiles, the soft clink of cups from the breakfast room. Everything looked normal. That was the cruelty of it. Her life was detonating in silence, and nobody else could hear the blast. Elena Russo kept her voice low. The system shows the reservation was canceled at 4:52 a.m. Payment authorization reversed at 4:55. Then the security deposit was voided. Courtney stared at the screen as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into mercy. They didn't. Reversed by who she asked. Elena glanced up. By the cardholder. Courtney's throat tightened, but her face stayed still. Ethan. It had to be Ethan. He had the access. He had the habit of turning every shared thing into his. Marco DeLuca appeared from the back office, his expression controlled and uncomfortable. He held Courtney's passport in his hand, not offering it, not hiding it. Just holding it like leverage. "I'm truly sorry," he said. "But until this is resolved, I cannot release the passport. It is policy. If I break policy, I lose my job." Courtney looked at the passport. Then at Marco. She heard the apology, but she also heard what sat beneath it. "You're trapped here until someone decides you're allowed to leave." She nodded once. "I understand." Elena blinked, surprised by how calm Courtney sounded. Courtney didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She had learned slowly and painfully that begging only teaches the wrong people how much power they have. "Can you print the transaction record?" she asked. Marco hesitated. "It's internal. It concerns my documents," Courtney said even. "I need proof for the consulate and the police. I'm not asking for favors. I'm asking for a report." Marco held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. Elena printed. Elena's hands moved quickly. Papers slid out. Dates, times, codes. A neat clinical timeline of sabotage. Courtney tucked the pages into her bag like evidence, not like hope. Outside, the street was bright, almost mocking. Courtney found a patch of shade near the entrance and plugged her phone into the portable charger Elena had lent her. The battery climbed slowly, 2%, 3%, 4%, as if her life were being rationed. At 7%, she called Ethan again. He answered with irritation, like she was interrupting a meeting. "What now?" he said. Courtney kept her breathing steady. "Release my passport." A pause. "I don't have it." Ethan replied, too quick. "The hotel won't give it to me because you reversed payment," Courtney said. "You know exactly what you did." Ethan sighed, the sound of a man bored by consequences. "Courtney, don't do this." Don't do what her tone didn't rise. "Ask for my legal documents. You're in Italy," he said. "Handle it." "I can't handle it without my passport." "Then stay," Ethan said. And there it was, the first crack where his cruelty showed clean. You always wanted an adventure. Courtney's fingers tightened around the phone. She heard breathing on his end, and then a soft laugh, feminine close. "Vanessa." Ethan didn't tell her to be quiet. He wanted Courtney to hear it. He wanted the humiliation to land. Courtney didn't give him that satisfaction. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, not pleading, measuring. Ethan's voice cooled. "Because I'm done paying for your indecision. Because I'm done carrying you." Courtney's gaze fixed on the cobblestones beneath her shoes. She pictured Ethan saying that line, rehearsing it, polishing it, until it sounded like a conclusion instead of theft. "You locked me out of my accounts," she said. "That's not ending a marriage. That's control." "It's protection," Ethan replied smoothly. "From you." Courtney understood then what story he planned to sell, not just to her, to everyone. A narrative where she was unstable, irresponsible, a liability. A woman who couldn't be trusted with money. A woman who had to be managed. A woman who could be erased. She asked one more question carefully. "Did you have me sign anything last night that changed access?" Ethan's silence lasted half a second too long. Then he chuckled. "You signed what you needed to sign." Courtney felt something cold settle in her stomach, not fear, clarity. "Put me on speaker," she said. "What put me on speaker?" Courtney repeated, "so Vanessa can hear." There was another pause, then the faint click of a button. Courtney didn't perform anger. She didn't cry. She offered him the most dangerous thing she had: composure. "Ethan," she said, "I'm going to file a report with the local police and the U.S. consulate. I'm going to document every reversal, every lockout, every signature you pressured me into. I'm going to request preservation of surveillance footage from the hotel." Vanessa's laugh stopped. Ethan scoffed. "You won't do anything." Courtney's voice stayed level. "You left a paper trail. You're bluffing." Courtney looked up at the hotel entrance where Marco stood watching discreetly from behind the glass. Elena hovered nearby. Witnesses, not friends, but witnesses were enough. "I'm not asking you to fix it," Courtney said. "I'm informing you that you can't undo it." Ethan's tone sharpened. "You think you can threaten me?" Courtney exhaled slowly. No, I think you threatened yourself. She ended the call before he could respond. For a moment, her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from adrenaline. She forced them still. She had to act while her nerves were awake. She walked back inside. Officer Alessandro Moretti was already there, speaking with Marco. He turned as Courtney approached, his expression attentive. "You reached him?" he asked. "Yes," Courtney said. "He confirmed he reversed payment and locked my access." Officer Moretti nodded. "We will add that to the report. Did he admit the signatures? He implied it," Courtney said. "He said I signed what I needed to sign." Officer Moretti's eyes narrowed slightly. Pressure to sign documents can be relevant. Courtney nodded. "I want everything recorded. Dates, times, names." Marco cleared his throat. "Madam, I truly..." Courtney cut him off gently, not unkind. "I know you have rules, Marco. I'm not blaming you. I'm asking you to help me show what happened." Marco hesitated, then gestured toward a side hallway. "There is a small office. You can sit. Elena will bring copies of the cancellation and the timestamps." In the office, the air smelled faintly of printer ink and furniture polish. Courtney sat at a small desk while Elena placed documents in front of her. Each page was another thread in the rope Ethan had used to bind her, and each thread could be pulled the other way. Officer Moretti asked questions in short, precise bursts. When did she arrive? When did she last have access to her accounts? When did Ethan pressure her to sign documents? When did she realize he was gone? Courtney answered without embellishment. She didn't dramatize. She didn't soften. When the report was complete, Officer Moretti stamped it and slid a copy across the desk. "This will help with the consulate," he said, "but it may take time." Courtney met his eyes. "I'm not asking for speed. I'm asking for record." He nodded as if he understood that record was where justice began. After he left, Elena hovered in the doorway, uncertain. "Do you have anyone you can call?" Elena asked quietly. Family. Courtney thought of her mother, Linda Ramirez, sharp, practical, loving, in the way that didn't tolerate lies. Courtney could call her, but she also knew that calling her mother first would open a door she might not be able to close. It would turn this from personal devastation into family war. Courtney wasn't ready to hand Ethan that kind of chaos. "Not yet," Courtney said. "But thank you." Elena's face softened. "You're very calm." Courtney's lips pressed together, almost a smile. "I'm not calm. I'm focused." That night, alone again, Courtney sat on the edge of the bed and opened the thin envelope she'd found in her bag. The one Ethan didn't know about. The one she hadn't opened until after he left. Beneficiary update confirmed. She read it slowly, letting the words sink deeper than comfort. This wasn't a rescue. It was leverage. It meant she wasn't as trapped as Ethan believed. It meant there was a part of her life he hadn't controlled. She pulled out her phone, now charged enough to function, and searched for an email address she hadn't used in years. Rachel Donovan, the attorney a colleague once called a scalpel in a tailored suit. Courtney had met her briefly at a corporate event long ago enough to know Rachel didn't waste time on drama. She dealt in outcomes. Courtney typed with clean, deliberate sentences. Stranded in Italy. Husband reversed payment, locked accounts, withheld access after pressuring signatures. Police report attached. Need immediate guidance on asset protection and document preservation. Call if possible. She attached the stamped report, the hotel timestamps, and a photo of the security alert email. She hit send. Then she placed the phone on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling until her breathing slowed. Outside, Italy glowed with beauty that didn't belong to her moment. Somewhere across an ocean, Ethan Cole Wright was probably already rewriting the story, painting himself as the victim preparing to steal what was left. Courtney didn't chase his version. She built her own. Because the thing Ethan never understood, never respected, was that Courtney's silence was not surrender. It was strategy. Morning came without comfort, but with clarity. Courtney Ramirez woke before her alarm, the room washed in pale light. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the weight returned. The locked accounts, the withheld passport, the deliberate silence on the other side of the ocean. She sat up, planted her feet on the floor, and reached for her phone. No missed calls, no messages. Good. She showered quickly, dressed in the same clothes from the day before, and braided her hair with precise fingers. Control lived in small actions now. She gathered the documents from the desk police report, hotel transaction logs, screenshots of account alerts, and placed them in a neat stack inside her bag. Evidence didn't need to be dramatic. It needed to be intact. Downstairs, Marco nodded when he saw her. Elena offered coffee without asking. Courtney accepted it black. "I'll need access to the business center," Courtney said, "and copies of any footage from the lobby and hallway from yesterday morning." Marco inhaled slowly. "That may require approval." "I understand," Courtney replied. "Please tell them it's for an active police report and a consular request." Marco didn't argue. He made the call. In the business center, Courtney logged into her email and began organizing a timeline. She created folders, Italy account signatures. She named files by date and time. She annotated screenshots with short factual notes. No emotion, no speculation, just sequence. At 9:12 a.m., a new email arrived. "Rachel Donovan, I'm available for a call in 10 minutes. Secure line. Answer when ready." Courtney closed her eyes once, then she exhaled and answered. Rachel's voice was steady, unhurried. "Courtney Ramirez." "Yes, I read what you sent," Rachel said. "You did the right thing by documenting first." Courtney didn't respond. She listened. "Here's what we're going to do," Rachel continued. "We treat this as two tracks, survival and leverage. Survival means access to documents, funds for basic needs, and consular support. Leverage means freezing what he thinks he's already stolen." Courtney swallowed. "Can you do that from the U.S.? "I can initiate it," Rachel said. "If there's evidence of coercion or misrepresentation tied to signatures, and if marital assets were moved unilaterally, we can request an emergency hold. It won't resolve everything, but it can stop the bleeding." Courtney nodded, even though Rachel couldn't see her. "He'll deny coercion." "Of course he will," Rachel replied. "That's why we don't argue feelings. We argue process. Timing, access, pattern." Courtney glanced at the document spread before her. "I have timestamps, witnesses, a police report." "Good," Rachel said. "We'll need one more thing." "What proof you were financially dependent at the time of abandonment?" Rachel said. "Not emotionally, functionally." Courtney thought of the bank apps she couldn't access, the cards that declined, the hotel clerk holding her passport like a receipt. "I can show that," she said. "Then we move?" Rachel replied. "I'll draft notices to the banks and to his company's legal department. Preservation of records, no deletions, no transfers." Courtney felt a shift, not relief, but alignment. Like stepping into a current she'd been swimming toward without knowing it. "Rachel," she said. "He thinks I'm stuck." Rachel paused. "That's a common mistake." The call ended with instructions. Courtney followed them immediately. She forwarded files. She uploaded scans. She signed a limited authorization. This one read slowly, carefully twice. At noon, Elena brought a USB drive. "Lobby and hallway footage," she said quietly. From the morning he left. Courtney thanked her and copied the files onto her laptop. She watched the footage once, then again. Ethan moving through the hallway with purpose, a suitcase in hand. Vanessa trailing behind him, checking her phone. No hesitation, no pause at the door. He hadn't woken her because he didn't want witnesses. She closed the video and labeled the file. Departure 04:16 a.m. Officer Alessandro Moretti returned that afternoon with a stamped addendum to the report. "Your husband admitted to reversing payment," he confirmed. "Yes," Courtney said. "On a recorded call." He nodded. "We'll note it." As he left, Courtney caught her reflection in the glass eye's tired jaw set. She didn't look like someone waiting to be rescued. She looked like someone building a case. At 3:40 p.m., another email arrived. This one, from a bank she recognized. Notice received. Temporary review initiated. Courtney didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She marked the time and moved on. She stepped outside briefly, letting the air clear her head. Italy hummed around her, beautiful, indifferent. She thought of Ethan in his office back home, already spinning his version of events. Already telling people she'd chosen to stay. Already planning to finalize whatever transfer he thought was complete. He was counting on her isolation. He hadn't counted on her discipline. Back in her room, Courtney opened the thin envelope again. The one that had waited quietly at the bottom of her bag. Beneficiary update confirmed. She read the details this time. Dates, accounts, conditions. This wasn't money she could touch immediately. It wasn't a miracle. It was proof of independence, proof that a part of her financial identity existed beyond Ethan's reach. She photographed the letter and forwarded it to Rachel. Minutes later, her phone rang. Rachel's voice carried a note of approval. That changes the board. Does it? Courtney asked. It means he doesn't control your future access to resources, Rachel said. It also means he underestimated you. Courtney looked at the city beyond the window. He's done that before. Then he'll do it again, Rachel replied. Which helps us. That evening, Courtney finally called her mother. Linda Ramirez answered on the first ring. Where are you? Italy, Courtney said. A pause. Why do you sound like that? He left me, Courtney said simply. Locked me out of accounts, reversed payments, took off. Silence. Then Linda spoke, her voice steady and sharp. Are you safe? Yes, good, Linda said. Then listen. Don't explain. Don't justify. Tell me what you need. Courtney closed her eyes. I need you to know I'm handling it. Another pause. Okay, Linda said. Then I'm here, quietly. They hung up without ceremony. As night settled, Courtney organized one last folder next 72 hours. She listed tasks, calls, deadlines. She left space for contingencies. Her phone buzzed again. Rachel Donovan. We've initiated preservation requests. He's going to notice. Courtney typed back. Let him. She placed the phone face down and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The fear hadn't vanished. It had simply been repurposed, refined into attention, into precision. Ethan had taken her money. He'd tried to take her mobility. He'd tried to take her voice. What he hadn't taken was her ability to respond. And in the quiet of that Italian night, Courtney Ramirez understood something with absolute certainty. Silence wasn't weakness. It was the space where power gathered. The first crack in Ethan Cole Wright's confidence appeared 48 hours after he left Italy. Courtney didn't see it. She felt it. It arrived as a subtle shift, an email routed through 3 layers of formality, a notification that didn't belong to her, but mentioned her name anyway. Preservation request acknowledged. Review pending, language that sounded neutral but carried weight. Ethan had noticed. Courtney sat in the small hotel room with the curtains half drawn, her laptop open, documents aligned like instruments on a surgical tray. She had slept 3 hours. It was enough. Fatigue sharpened her focus instead of dulling it. She replayed the last year of her marriage, not with regret, but with inventory. Ethan had always framed control as efficiency. He handled finances because he was better with numbers. He handled travel because he liked planning. He handled contracts because legal details were boring. Each choice seemed reasonable on its own. Together, they formed a cage, and so elegant Courtney hadn't seen the bars until the door slammed shut. Now she saw them clearly. Her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She didn't answer immediately. She checked the time. 8:06 a.m. Eastern. Business hours. She let it ring once more, then picked up. Courtney, Ethan said. His voice was different. Not cold, not bored, measured. You didn't think I'd notice, he continued when she didn't respond. Courtney didn't rush to fill the silence. She waited. You've been making calls, Ethan said. Creating problems? I've been documenting facts, Courtney replied. A breath on the other end. Controlled irritation. You're overreacting. She almost smiled. That line used to work. You reversed payment, locked me out of accounts, and left the country, Courtney said. That's not an overreaction. That's a record. Ethan exhaled slowly. I did what I had to do. For whom? Courtney asked. For myself, Ethan said. and for the company. Courtney leaned back in her chair. Those aren't the same thing. Ethan didn't answer right away. She imagined him pacing jaw-tight, calculating angles the way he always did. He had never understood that Courtney could calculate too. She simply hadn't weaponized it. "I can fix this," Ethan said finally, quietly. Courtney's voice remained level. "I'm not interested in quiet. You're stranded in a foreign country," Ethan snapped, "with no access to funds. You think you're in control?" Courtney glanced at the open email on her screen, the one confirming temporary review of shared accounts. "I think control isn't as one-sided as you believed." Another pause, longer this time. "What did you send them?" Ethan asked. "Everything," Courtney replied. "In order." Ethan's tone sharpened. "You're making a mistake." Courtney's eyes didn't leave the screen. "You already made yours." She ended the call. Her hands were steady when she set the phone down. The tremor came later, brief, contained. She let it pass without judgment. 10 minutes later, Rachel Donovan's name appeared on her screen. "He reached out," Rachel said without preamble. "Yes," Courtney replied. "Good," Rachel said. "That means the notice landed. He's uncomfortable." Courtney closed her eyes. What happens next? Next, Rachel said, "We established that his discomfort is justified." Rachel explained the process with clarity that felt like scaffolding. Requests sent, responses logged, a formal notice to Ethan's company's legal counsel, preservation of internal communications, financial institutions alerted to potential unauthorized transfers under marital asset laws. "It doesn't mean he's guilty yet," Rachel said. "It means he can't pretend this didn't happen." Courtney absorbed every word. "What about the documents I signed?" "We'll challenge the context," Rachel replied. "Timing, location, pressure. He flew you overseas, isolated you, then presented complex paperwork with implied urgency. That matters." Courtney thought of the restaurant, the wine, the way Ethan had smiled while she hesitated. Vanessa was there. Rachel's voice sharpened slightly. "Good. Witnesses cut both ways." After the call, Courtney walked downstairs to the lobby. Marco looked up from the desk, concern etched into his face. "Any news?" he asked gently. "Some," Courtney said. "Thank you for your help." He nodded. "If you need anything else?" "Printing copy statements, I will," Courtney said. "And I'll make sure it's noted that you followed procedure." Marco smiled faintly. "That matters." Back in her room, Courtney opened the file Elena had copied for her hotel record security logs transaction summaries. She added them to the growing archive and sent an updated packet to Rachel. Then she did something unexpected. She wrote a single-page summary. No emotion, no adjectives, just dates, actions, consequences. April 12th, 4:16 a.m. Husband departs hotel with third party. April 12th, 4:52 a.m. Payment authorization reversed. April 12th, 4:55 a.m. Security deposit voided. April 12th, 5:03 a.m. Account access revoked. She titled the document Sequence, because narratives could be manipulated. Sequences could not. That afternoon, a new email arrived, this one, from Ethan's company's general counsel. "We've received notice regarding asset preservation. We are reviewing internally." Courtney forwarded it to Rachel without comment. Minutes later, Rachel replied, "That's confirmation. He can't move anything significant without scrutiny now." Courtney leaned back and stared at the ceiling. The room felt smaller, but she felt larger within it. Not empowered in a cinematic way, grounded, anchored. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Linda. "I booked a flight to Rome." Courtney typed back immediately, "No, stay home." A pause. "Then I raised you. Don't tell me to sit down." Courtney smiled for the first time in days. "I'm not asking you to sit down," she replied. "I'm asking you to wait. I need this clean." Several seconds passed. "Okay," Linda wrote, "but I'm on standby." That night, Courtney stepped onto the balcony. The city breathed beneath her distant laughter, footsteps on stone, a violin, somewhere she couldn't see. Life unbothered by her crisis. She thought of Ethan again, not with longing, not with rage, with assessment. He believed abandonment was power. He believed silence belonged to the one who walked away. He was wrong. Silence belonged to the one who stayed long enough to document everything. Courtney returned inside and opened her laptop once more. A new folder waited on the desktop, empty but promising. She named it Return, because this was no longer about survival. It was about reclamation. KT Thuk, PHN6, Tai PTCU CUVTD 1000 to 1200, T Theo Qui DNH, PHN7. On the third day, Courtney Ramirez stopped thinking like a stranded spouse and started moving like an operator. Not because the fear was gone. It wasn't. It sat under her ribs like a held breath. But fear, she realized, was only dangerous when it made people rush. Courtney didn't rush. She built steps. Rachel Donovan sent a short list that morning: clean, actionable, unforgiving. Secure travel documents through the consulate. Request written statements from hotel staff. Preserve and duplicate every digital file. Identify the exact mechanism of the access change. Do not contact Ethan again unless instructed. Courtney read the list twice, then began. At the U.S. consulate, she didn't dramatize. She didn't narrate heartbreak. She handed over the police report, the hotel transaction logs, and a printed timeline titled Sequence. The officer behind the glass scanned the papers, then looked up. "Your passport is being held by the hotel," he asked. "Yes," Courtney said, "because payment was reversed after my husband left the country." The officer's gaze sharpened. "And you have documentation showing the reversal timestamp?" Courtney slid the printout forward. "Yes." The officer nodded slowly, as if recalibrating his assumptions. He stamped a form and explained procedures: formal request temporary travel documentation, if needed follow-up with local authorities. He didn't promise speed. He promised process. Courtney thanked him and left with two things: a case number and a written acknowledgement that she had reported the situation through official channels. It wasn't comfort. It was a trail. Back at the hotel, Marco DeLuca met her with a folder. "I asked Elena to write a statement," he said quietly, "about what she saw at the desk and what the system showed." Courtney accepted it. "Thank you." Marco hesitated, then added, "I also reviewed the security logs. The times match your report." Courtney held his gaze. "Would you be willing to sign a statement confirming you withheld my passport only due to policy, and that the policy was triggered by the reversal?" Marco exhaled. "Yes, I will." She didn't praise him. She didn't ask why. She simply nodded and moved on. In her room, Courtney scanned and saved each document, then duplicated everything onto 2 drives, one in her bag, one hidden in the lining of her suitcase. Redundancy was not paranoia. It was insurance. Then she turned to the one item still bothering her, the documents she had signed. She opened the PDF again and forced herself to read the legal language, not as a wife, but as a risk analyst. The terms were intentionally vague: authorization to confirm travel-related expenditures, permission to coordinate reimbursement, consent to adjust payment methods as necessary. It sounded harmless until it didn't. Courtney zoomed in on the signature page. There was a reference number in the footer, tiny, easy to overlook. WRX 94172. She copied it into her notes. Then she checked the PDF properties. Creator Wright Holdings Legal Template System. Last modified 0411, 11:38 p.m. Document ID, WH Portal Internal. Courtney's pulse didn't spike. It slowed. Internal portal. Not a travel form. Not a hotel form. Not an insurance form. A company form. Ethan hadn't simply used her signature to manage a trip. He'd pulled her into something that belonged to his business, something he could later claim she approved. She forwarded the PDF metadata screenshots to Rachel with a single line: "This is company-generated. Internal portal reference present." Rachel responded within minutes. "Excellent. That's a hook for discovery." Find the portal path if you can. Do not attempt anything that looks like hacking. Only use information already accessible to you. Courtney understood the boundary. She wasn't going to break laws to expose someone else's. She didn't need to. Ethan always left doors unlocked. He just assumed nobody else would check. She searched her email for old messages from Ethan's company. Holiday invitations, travel confirmations, HR notices he'd forwarded without thinking. Buried in one thread was a link. Wright Holdings Employee Access Portal. Courtney stared at it for a long moment. She wasn't an employee, but she had once been included on a spouse emergency contact form for corporate travel. Ethan had insisted years ago that it was just standard. She'd forgotten about it. He hadn't. She clicked the link. A login page appeared. She didn't enter anything. She wasn't going to guess passwords. That wasn't her game. But she saw the structure of the URL, and it matched the metadata labeled WH Portal. She copied the URL, took a screenshot, and saved it. The portal existed. The document was generated from within it. That alone mattered. Then Courtney did the next smartest thing she could do. She stopped working alone. She needed a witness inside Ethan's system who could touch the truth without crossing lines. Someone who could confirm what the reference code belonged to legally cleanly with credibility. Rachel had mentioned one name on their first call, Thomas Reed, the CFO. Courtney hadn't contacted him yet because timing mattered, and because she wanted her first message to be impossible to ignore. She drafted the email the way she'd drafted everything else, short, factual, controlled. Thomas, you don't know me well, but you know my name. I'm in Italy. Ethan reversed hotel payment at 0452 and locked me out of accounts within minutes. Police report attached. This is not a marital dispute. It is a documented pattern of access manipulation. I have a company-generated PDF with portal reference WRX 94172 and metadata indicating internal origin. If you have any involvement in approvals tied to that reference, your name may be attached whether you consent it or not. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm advising you to protect yourself. She attached the police report, the sequence timeline, and a screenshot of the PDF properties. Then she didn't send it immediately. She read it once more, checking for emotion. There was none, only consequence. She hit send. Courtney's hands remained steady afterward, but her breathing changed shallower, sharper. She walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't look triumphant. She looked awake. Her phone buzzed with a new notification, a calendar invite from Rachel. Emergency strategy call 5:00 p.m. EST. Courtney joined at exactly the scheduled minute. Rachel's face appeared on screen, composed as always. I received your metadata, she said. That's excellent work. Courtney didn't soften. Is it enough? It's enough to justify demanding the full chain, Rachel replied. But we need a cooperating insider to make it airtight. I emailed Thomas Reed, Courtney said. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly, not in disapproval calculation. What did you send Courtney summarized? Rachel nodded once. Good, Rachel said. That approach will land. It doesn't threaten him. It warns him. Courtney's jaw tightened. Ethan will pressure him. Of course, Rachel replied, which is why we document that pressure too. After the call, Courtney sat in silence for a moment. Italy's evening sounds drifted through the window traffic, voices, distant music. It felt surreal that the world could still be beautiful while her marriage turned into a legal battlefield. At 9:23 p.m., an email arrived. From Thomas Reed. Courtney's chest tightened, not with hope, with readiness. The subject line contained only 5 words. We need to talk, now. Courtney stared at the screen, then clicked open the message. It was brief. Do you still have that reference code? Don't answer by email. I'll call from a secure line. 10 minutes. Courtney leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Ethan had built his empire on speed and control. He'd assumed Courtney would stay confused, stay quiet, stay stranded. But 3 days in, she had done the opposite. She had turned his abandonment into a file, his cruelty into timestamps. And now the man who held the company's numbers, Ethan's own financial gatekeeper, was reaching out. Courtney didn't smile. She simply opened her notes, pulled up the reference code, and waited for the call. Because she knew what came next. When the inside starts speaking, the collapse stops being a possibility. It becomes a schedule. Thomas Reed's call came exactly 10 minutes later. No greeting, no pleasantries. "Before you say anything," he said, his voice low and controlled, "I need to establish one thing." "Are you recording this?" Courtney answered honestly. "Yes," Good Thomas replied. "So am I." That alone told her everything. He wasn't calling to protect Ethan. He was calling to protect himself. "Start from the reference code," Thomas said. "BURX 94172. "Where did you get it?" "It's embedded in a document Ethan pressured me to sign in Italy," Courtney replied. The metadata shows it was generated from Wright Holdings' internal portal. There was a pause. She could hear keyboard taps on his end, quick practiced. "That code belongs to a restricted workflow," Thomas said finally. "Executive level, not travel, not reimbursement." Courtney didn't interrupt. It authorized temporary asset rerouting under the pretext of operational continuity. Thomas continued. "It's meant for emergency scenarios. Illness, incapacitation, hostile takeovers, not vacations." Courtney felt the weight of that land, but her voice stayed level. "And whose approval does it require?" Thomas said. "CEO initiation and CFO acknowledgement." Courtney closed her eyes briefly. "Did you acknowledge it?" "No," Thomas said immediately. "And that's the problem." Silence stretched between them, heavy but clean. "Ethan bypassed the second acknowledgement," Courtney said, not asking. "Yes," Thomas replied, "which means the system logged an anomaly." Courtney pictured Ethan late at night, confident rushing, assuming speed would outrun scrutiny. "What did he reroute?" Thomas exhaled. "Joint liquid assets, not all of them. Enough to create pressure, enough to make you feel stranded." Courtney let that sentence sit. Ethan hadn't just left her, he'd engineered desperation. "If this comes out," Thomas said, "he'll say you consented." "I didn't," Courtney replied, "and the timing proves it." "Yes," Thomas agreed. "It does." Another pause. This one different. Decision weighted. "I won't lie for him," Thomas said. "But I need to be careful." "I understand," Courtney replied. "I'm not asking you to testify today." "What are you asking?" Thomas asked. Courtney chose her words precisely. "I'm asking you to preserve everything tied to that workflow. Logs, access trails, internal messages. And to confirm off record for now whether he's done this before." Thomas didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. "Not like this. But there have been adjustments. Close calls. I warned him." Courtney opened her eyes. "Did he listen?" "No," Thomas said. "He never does." They ended the call without ceremony. No promises, no alliances declared. Just mutual awareness of risk. Courtney documented the call immediately. Time duration summary. She sent a short update to Rachel. Thomas confirmed reference code belongs to executive emergency asset rerouting. Requires CFO acknowledgement. He did not approve. Logs show anomaly. Rachel responded within minutes. "That's significant. Do not contact him again unless I advise." We move carefully. Courtney obeyed. Across the Atlantic, Ethan Cole Wright was unraveling. He didn't feel it as panic, not yet. He felt it as friction. Delays where there shouldn't be delays. Emails that used to get instant replies now sat unanswered. A calendar notification appeared without explanation. Compliance review, tentative. Vanessa noticed first. Why did legal ask for access logs? She asked, scrolling through her tablet. Ethan didn't look up. Routine. Why now? Because companies grow. Ethan snapped. Stop hovering. Vanessa watched him carefully. She had aligned herself with Ethan because he projected inevitability, control, momentum. Men like that didn't lose, they exited. But now, there was a crack. Ethan's phone buzzed again. An investor. Then another. Then a message from General Counsel requesting a call as soon as possible. "Did you talk to Thomas?" Vanessa asked. Ethan hesitated just long enough to betray himself. Why would I? Vanessa leaned back. Because he's not picking up. Ethan stood abruptly. I need air. He stepped into the hallway and called Thomas directly. Voicemail. Again. Nothing. Ethan's jaw tightened. He told himself Courtney was bluffing. She always hesitated. She always waited for permission. He hadn't accounted for what isolation would do to her. Back in Italy, Courtney sat in the hotel lounge with her laptop closed. She wasn't working now. She was waiting. Waiting was part of the plan. At 2:17 p.m. local time, Rachel called. Media just reached out, she said. Courtney's posture changed instantly. Already yes, Rachel replied. A reporter named Megan Foster, Financial Misconduct Beat. She received an anonymous tip. Courtney didn't need to ask who sent it. What do? We don't run, Rachel said. But we don't lead with emotion. We give her 3 things, which are proof you were abandoned abroad, Rachel said. Proof of access manipulation. Proof of a financial workflow irregularity. No accusations, just facts. Courtney nodded. I have all 3. Then we prepare a packet, Rachel said. Nothing leaks unless it serves a purpose. They worked in parallel. Courtney assembled the materials with the same discipline she'd applied from the beginning. Camera footage, time-stamped reversals, the reference code metadata, the police report. She removed anything that read like vengeance. She left only what read like truth. When the packet was complete, Rachel reviewed it line by line. This is strong, she said. It doesn't shout. It invites scrutiny. Courtney stared out the window as Rachel spoke. Ethan will say, I'm unstable. Rachel's tone hardened. Then he'll have to explain why instability required an executive asset reroute at 4 a.m. That night, the article didn't publish. But the questions started. Ethan's phone buzzed through dinner. Vanessa watched him read messages, his appetite gone. What's happening? She asked. Ethan didn't answer. At 11:48 p.m., he finally checked his personal email. A subject line froze him. Notice of preservation obligation. The sender, Rachel Donovan. He read it once, then again. His hands were shaking now, not from fear but from rage. Courtney had crossed a line, not a marital one, a strategic one. He called her. She didn't answer. He texted, You think you're clever? Call me. No response. Across the ocean, Courtney lay on her bed, fully dressed, phone face down. She had already told Rachel she wouldn't engage. Silence wasn't avoidance anymore. It was containment. At midnight, another email arrived. This one from Megan Foster. I'd like to hear your side. Off the record to start. Courtney forwarded it to Rachel without replying. Rachel called immediately. We say yes, she said, but we control the frame. Courtney closed her eyes. When tomorrow, Rachel replied, Your morning, his night. Courtney understood the timing. Power lived there too. She turned off the lamp and lay in the dark listening to the city breathe. Somewhere far away, Ethan was discovering what it felt like to lose the advantage he thought was permanent. 3 days ago, he'd abandoned her with nothing. Now his own systems were turning their lights on. And for the first time since Italy, Courtney Ramirez slept without dreaming. Courtney Ramirez woke before sunrise, not from anxiety, but from precision. Her meeting with Megan Foster was scheduled for 8:00 a.m. Rome time. Courtney arrived at the small cafe Rachel had chosen 15 minutes early, laptop closed, documents printed and clipped in a slim folder. No dramatics, no entourage, just record and restraint. Megan arrived exactly on time. She didn't look like a sensationalist. No bright lipstick, no oversized recorder. She wore neutral colors, moved efficiently, and listened before speaking. That alone earned Courtney's attention. Off the record to start, Megan said, setting her phone face down. I want to understand the sequence before I ask anything. Courtney nodded. That's how I prepared it. She slid the folder across the table. Megan didn't open it immediately. She watched Courtney instead, posture eyes breathing. Courtney met her gaze without flinching. I was abandoned abroad, Courtney began. Not emotionally, logistically. Megan lifted an eyebrow. Explain. Courtney did. Dates, times, actions. She didn't speculate about motives. She didn't call Ethan names. She described what happened the way one would describe a mechanical failure, precise, impersonal, undeniable. When Megan finally opened the folder, she didn't interrupt. She read. She took notes. She circled timestamps with a pen and underlined the reference code. This workflow, Megan said quietly, tapping the page, it's not consumer level. No, Courtney replied. It's executive. And you didn't approve it. I didn't understand it, Courtney said. And I was pressured to sign in a foreign country with limited context. Megan closed the folder. That matters. They spoke for 40 minutes. When it ended, Megan stood and extended her hand. This won't be a hit piece, she said. It will be a question. Courtney shook her hand. That's all I want. Back at the hotel, Courtney received a message from Rachel. Good work. We hold until publication. No comments, no reactions. Courtney complied. By noon Eastern Time, the question went live. It didn't accuse, it didn't condemn. It didn't name villains. It asked how a CEO could reverse shared assets, abandon a spouse abroad, and trigger an internal executive workflow without oversight within minutes of departure. And it asked why. The market noticed first. A scheduled partner call was postponed pending clarification. A minor investor requested documentation. Compliance teams requested logs. By evening, Ethan Cole Wright was no longer angry. He was scared. Vanessa paced his office while he stared at his screen. This is escalating, she said. We need to respond. We don't respond to speculation, Ethan snapped. We deny. You can't deny logs, Vanessa replied. They're asking for logs. Ethan slammed his laptop shut. I'll call Thomas. Thomas didn't answer. Ethan's phone rang instead. It was legal counsel. We need to meet, counsel said. Now. At the meeting, the tone was different. No flattery, no reassurance, just procedure. Asset preservation is in effect, counsel explained. We've received notice from opposing counsel. Until we review internal approvals, certain actions are frozen. Ethan leaned forward. This is a misunderstanding. Counsel didn't blink. Then the documentation will clear it. And if it doesn't, counsel's voice stayed neutral. Then we have exposure. Vanessa watched Ethan carefully. The man she had aligned herself with a decisive commanding was shrinking under fluorescent lights. She made a decision of her own that night. Across the ocean, Courtney returned to the consulate. This time, the tone had shifted. We've received confirmation from your hotel, the officer said, and from local police. Courtney nodded. We can issue a temporary travel document, he continued. You'll be able to return to the U.S. while your passport situation is resolved. Courtney felt relief then, not because she was leaving Italy, but because the choice was hers again. Thank you, she said. At the hotel, Marco handed her an envelope. This arrived for you, he said. Inside was a letter from Ethan's company, formal, cautious, requesting cooperation in an internal review. Courtney didn't read it twice. She forwarded it to Rachel. No response. Rachel replied immediately. We wait. Waiting was easier now. That evening, Thomas Reed called again. I can't stay quiet much longer, he said. I'm not asking you to. Courtney replied. I'm asking you to stay accurate. There was a pause. He pressured me, Thomas said, after you emailed. Courtney didn't react. Did you document it? Yes, Thomas said, and I saved the logs. Then do what protects you, Courtney said. I'll do the same. The call ended. By the next morning, Ethan's name appeared in a second article. This one quoted sources. It didn't need Courtney's voice anymore. At noon, Rachel called with the update Courtney had been waiting for. They're moving to suspend him pending investigation, she said. Courtney closed her eyes. Not victory, not revenge. Completion. I'm flying back tomorrow, Courtney said. Good, Rachel replied. We'll be ready. Courtney packed slowly. She folded the clothes she'd worn through the worst days and placed the thin envelope, the beneficiary confirmation, on top. Italy had been where Ethan tried to erase her. America would be where she finished the record. She checked out of the hotel with receipts, copies, and signatures. Marco shook her hand. Elena hugged her briefly. "You were very strong," Elena said. Courtney shook her head gently. "I was very prepared." At the airport, she sat alone at the gate boarding pass and hand phone silent. For the first time in days, she wasn't reacting. She was returning. Courtney Ramirez landed in the United States on a gray morning that felt deliberately neutral, as if the world were withholding judgment. She moved through the airport without spectacled temporary travel document in hand, phone powered off until she reached the curb. The air smelled familiar. Exhaust and rain and coffee. Home, but not safe yet. Rachel Donovan was waiting in a black sedan posture, straight eyes alert. "Welcome back," Rachel said. No hug, no soft landing, just momentum. They drove in silence for several blocks. Courtney watched the city pass the geometry of buildings she'd once shared with Ethan, the places he'd claimed as proof of success. None of it pulled at her now. Rachel broke the silence. "The board convened last night." Courtney turned. "Without him with him present," Rachel replied. "But not in control." "What did they decide?" "Temporary suspension of executive authority pending investigation," Rachel said. "He's furious. Vanessa's vanished." Courtney absorbed that. Vanished, how resigned. Cleared her calendar. Deleted company access within an hour of the second article. Courtney nodded. Vanessa had always known when to leave. At Rachel's office, the room felt sterile in a way Courtney welcomed. White walls, clean lines, no personal photographs, just work. Rachel laid out the plan with the same precision she'd shown from the beginning. "Today is about containment," she said, "not confrontation. We don't engage emotionally. We let the process speak." Courtney sat hands folded. "What does he do next?" "He tries to control the narrative," Rachel replied. "He'll ask for a private meeting. He'll offer a settlement. He'll frame it as mercy." Courtney's jaw set, "And we don't take it. We listen," Rachel said. "Then we document." As if on cue, Courtney's phone buzzed. "Ethan." She looked at Rachel. Rachel nodded once. Courtney answered. "Courtney," Ethan said, his voice urgent but practiced. "You're back." "Yes," Courtney replied. "Good," he said. "We need to talk. In person." "We can schedule through counsel," Courtney said evenly. Ethan exhaled sharply. "I don't want lawyers in the room." "That won't be possible," Courtney replied. A pause. She could hear him recalibrating. "You're blowing this out of proportion," Ethan said. "We can fix it quietly." Courtney leaned back in her chair. "You said that when you left me without a passport." "That's not fair," Ethan snapped. "You know how the system works." "I do," Courtney said. "Now." Another silence, this one heavier. "Meet me," Ethan said finally. "Just us. I'll explain everything." Courtney glanced at Rachel, who shook her head almost imperceptibly. "Any meeting goes through counsel," Courtney repeated. "Goodbye, Ethan." She ended the call. Her hands were steady. Rachel smiled faintly. Good. The rest of the morning unfolded in controlled bursts. Emails from compliance, requests from internal auditors. Rachel responded to each with surgical brevity, copying Courtney only when necessary. At noon, the board issued a statement. It didn't name guilt. It acknowledged inquiry. Markets don't like uncertainty, but they respect procedure. Ethan's stock dipped, then stabilized, waiting. By mid-afternoon, Thomas Reed arrived at Rachel's office through a side entrance. He looked tired, older. "I'm not here to make friends," he said as he sat. "I'm here to survive," Rachel nodded. "That's wise." Thomas placed a folder on the table. Logs, approvals, messages, including the call where Ethan pressured me after Courtney emailed. Courtney didn't reach for it. She waited. "I won't testify unless compelled," Thomas continued. "But I will attest to the process, and I will not lie." Rachel opened the folder and scanned the top page. "That may be enough." Thomas looked at Courtney for the first time. "I'm sorry." Courtney met his gaze. Accuracy matters more than apologies. Thomas nodded, accepting the boundary. That evening, Rachel walked Courtney through the next phase. "Tomorrow we file for formal asset freeze pending resolution," Rachel said. "We also request a hearing regarding coercion and misrepresentation." Courtney inhaled slowly. "And Ethan, he escalates." Rachel replied. "Which helps us. Escalation came sooner than expected." At 8:42 p.m., Ethan sent a message not to Courtney but to Linda Ramirez. "Your daughter is destroying her own future." Linda forwarded it to Courtney with one line. "Do you want me quiet or loud?" Courtney replied, "Quiet. For now." Linda responded with a thumbs up and a heart. That was enough. The next morning, Ethan tried a different tactic. A courier arrived at Rachel's office with a thick envelope addressed to Courtney. Inside was a proposed settlement. Money, property, silence. Ethan's signature sat at the bottom, bold and confident, as if he were still the one making decisions. Rachel reviewed it once, then slid it across the table to Courtney. Courtney didn't touch it. "What's the condition?" Courtney asked. "Non-disparagement, non-disclosure, immediate withdrawal of cooperation with any inquiry." Courtney smiled, not with amusement, but with clarity. "He's afraid." Rachel nodded. "Yes." Courtney stood. "We reject." Rachel didn't hesitate. "On the record, yes," Courtney said, "and note the timing." Rachel typed the response. "Crisp, professional, final." By afternoon, the board reconvened. This time, Ethan wasn't invited. The call was brief, decisive. His executive authority was suspended indefinitely. Courtney learned the news from Rachel, not the media. She sat quietly as it landed. Not satisfaction, not triumph, release. That night, alone in her apartment, Courtney unpacked the last of her bags. She placed the thin envelope, the beneficiary confirmation, into a fireproof box, along with copies of every document she'd collected. She didn't open a bottle of wine. She didn't call friends. She made tea and sat by the window watching traffic move like veins of light through the city. Her phone buzzed once more. "Ethan." She didn't answer. She turned it face down and let the silence do its work. Because for the first time since Italy, the power dynamic had reversed, not through shouting, not through revenge, but through record restraint and resolve. And Ethan Cole Wright was running out of room. Ethan Cole Wright asked for the meeting the way men like him always did, through intermediaries. Softened language and a promise of reason. Rachel Donovan forwarded the request with a single line. "He wants 10 minutes, off the record." Courtney read it once. Then again, "No," she said. Rachel waited. She had learned when Courtney needed space and when she needed pressure. "He's unraveling," Rachel said carefully. "That can be useful." Courtney folded her hands, not at the cost of clarity. Rachel nodded, then we counter. The counter was simple, a recorded meeting in Rachel's office with counsel present. No negotiations, no theatrics, just statements. Ethan accepted within the hour. He arrived early. Courtney watched him through the glass wall. Before he entered, his shoulders tight, his jaw clenched, the expensive suit suddenly ill-fitting. He looked smaller than she remembered. Not weaker, smaller, like a man whose surroundings had stopped responding to him. When he stepped inside, he didn't sit. "Courtney," he said, forcing warmth, "you look, well." She didn't respond. Rachel gestured to the chair. "Sit." Ethan obeyed, irritation flashing before he masked it. "I won't pretend I understand how this got so out of hand," Ethan began. "But we don't need to destroy each other." Courtney leaned back slightly. "You started this in Italy." Ethan's mouth tightened. "I did what I had to do." "For whom?" Courtney asked, repeating the question she'd asked days ago. "For the company," Ethan said. "For us." Courtney's eyes didn't waver. "You locked me out of my accounts. You reversed payment knowing my passport would be withheld. You pressured me into signing a document generated by your company's internal portal." "None of that was for us," Ethan scoffed. "You're twisting facts." Rachel interjected calmly. "We have logs." Ethan waved a hand. "Logs can be interpreted." Courtney leaned forward, then her voice low and steady. "So can character." Silence followed. The air thickened. Ethan shifted tactics. I offered a settlement. You offered silence, Courtney replied. I offered security. You offered control, she said. Again. Ethan's temper flared. You think this makes you powerful? Courtney met his gaze. I think it makes me accurate. Rachel slid a document across the table. This is the formal notice regarding coercion and misrepresentation. We filed. Ethan's face drained of color. You can't prove coercion. We don't need to prove it today, Rachel said. We need to preserve the record. Ethan stood abruptly. You're ruining everything. Courtney didn't raise her voice. You ruined it when you decided I was expendable. He stared at her, then, not as a husband, not as a negotiator, but as a man realizing the ground had shifted beyond recovery. This isn't over, Ethan said. Courtney nodded. I know. He left without another word. The days that followed moved quickly, but without chaos. That was the difference now. Every step had a name. Every action had a reason. Rachel filed the motion to freeze assets pending full adjudication. The court scheduled a hearing. Compliance expanded its review. The board issued a second statement, this one firmer. Ethan's access badge was deactivated. Vanessa Blake resurfaced briefly through an attorney offering cooperation in exchange for immunity. Rachel listened, asked questions, took notes. Courtney didn't comment. She had learned that letting others talk often revealed more than confrontation ever could. At night, when the city quieted, Courtney found the old reflexes creeping in, the urge to replay conversations, to imagine alternate endings. She stopped herself each time. Regret was not strategy. Linda Ramirez called every evening, her voice a steady anchor. She didn't ask for details. She asked about meals, sleep weather. She let Courtney remain whole. One afternoon, Megan Foster requested a follow-up on the record. Rachel reviewed the questions. They're fair, she said. No ambush. Courtney agreed. The interview was brief. Courtney spoke in measured sentences, never naming Ethan directly, never speculating about motives. I was abandoned abroad, she said. I documented what happened. I followed process. When asked how it felt, she paused. It felt clarifying, Courtney said. I learned the difference between trust and access. The article published the next day. It didn't go viral. It didn't need to. It circulated where it mattered. Investors asked harder questions. Partners delayed commitments. Internal emails surfaced fragments of concern that had been ignored before. Ethan's name became synonymous with risk. The hearing arrived on a Tuesday morning. Courtney wore a dark suit and no jewelry. She sat beside Rachel, posture straight, eyes forward. Ethan sat across the room, flanked by his attorneys, his expression carefully neutral. When Rachel spoke, she spoke plainly. When Courtney was asked to stand, she did so without ceremony. She answered questions directly. She did not embellish. She did not flinch. The judge listened. When the ruling came temporary, freeze-granted discovery, ordered the room exhaled. Ethan didn't look at Courtney as he left. Outside, Rachel placed a hand lightly on Courtney's shoulder. That was solid. Courtney nodded. What now? Now, Rachel said, we let discovery do what it does. Weeks passed. Files were exchanged. Depositions scheduled. Thomas Reed submitted a sworn affidavit confirming pressure and irregularities. Vanessa's cooperation was partial, self-serving, but useful. Ethan's defenses narrowed. One evening, as Courtney reviewed a stack of documents, she found herself unexpectedly tired. Not exhausted. Done. She closed the file and leaned back, letting the weight lift. This wasn't victory, not yet, but it was balance. And balance, she realized, was the beginning of healing. Discovery did not arrive like a storm. It arrived like daylight, slow, exposing, unavoidable. Boxes of records were delivered to Rachel Donovan's office over the course of a week. Digital files arrived in waves, meticulously cataloged by teams who had no emotional stake in the marriage, only a professional obligation to truth. Courtney watched the process from a quiet distance, reviewing summaries, answering questions, when asked, never volunteering speculation. This phase wasn't about her voice. It was about paper. Rachel walked her through the first tranche of findings with controlled precision. We have internal emails referencing the emergency workflow, she said. We have time-stamped access logs showing Ethan initiated the reroute. We also have a recorded call where he pressures Thomas Reed after your email. Courtney listened, hands folded. Does it show intent? It shows urgency, Rachel replied. And urgency paired with concealment is persuasive. The deposition schedule followed. Thomas Reed went first. Courtney didn't attend. She didn't need to. Rachel briefed her afterward. He was careful, Rachel said, but consistent. He acknowledged the workflow's purpose, confirmed he did not authorize it, and stated Ethan pressured him to backdate acknowledgement. Courtney exhaled slowly. That matters. It does, Rachel said, especially because Thomas documented the pressure contemporaneously. Next came Vanessa Blake. Her deposition was different. Defensive, selective. She claimed limited knowledge, framed herself as an advisor caught between spouses, emphasized her departure as an ethical choice. Rachel listened without interruption. When it ended, she turned to Courtney. She's protecting herself. Of course, Courtney replied. Does it change anything? It corroborates timing, Rachel said. And it places her in the room when you signed. That night, Courtney returned home and sat in the quiet. She didn't replay the past. She considered the future, the shape of it, the weight of it, the boundaries she would insist on keeping. The hearing on coercion and misrepresentation was scheduled for Friday. Courtney slept well the night before. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was restrained. No gasps, no raised voices. Just questions and answers framed by procedure. Ethan sat at the defense table, posture, rigid eyes fixed forward. He didn't look at Courtney. Rachel presented the sequence again, this time reinforced by discovery, the internal portal origin, the missing acknowledgement, the timing of the reversal, the immediate lockout, the abandonment abroad. Ethan's counsel argued consent, argued misunderstanding, argued marital complexity. The judge listened, asked clarifying questions, and took notes. When Courtney was called, she stood without hesitation. She described the signing calmly. The location, the context, the pressure of time, the lack of explanation. She didn't say she was afraid. She said she was uninformed. When asked why she didn't refuse to sign, she answered simply, "Because I trusted my husband." The room was still. The ruling came after a brief recess. The judge found sufficient evidence to sustain claims of coercion and misrepresentation for the purposes of continued asset restraint and expanded discovery. Sanctions were considered. Oversight was ordered. Courtney sat as the words landed, not as a verdict, but as validation of a process. Outside the courtroom, cameras waited. Megan Foster stood among them, notebook in hand. She didn't push forward. She waited for Courtney to approach. Courtney didn't. Rachel issued a brief statement on her behalf, measured factual final. Ms. Ramirez is grateful for the court's attention to procedure, Rachel said. She will continue to cooperate fully. No questions were taken. That afternoon, the Board of Right Holdings convened again. This time, the meeting was not procedural. It was corrective. By evening, Rachel had the update. They voted to remove him permanently, she said. Cause cited. Courtney closed her eyes. And criminal exposure, Courtney asked. Referred, Rachel replied. Not guaranteed, but active. Courtney nodded. That was enough. Ethan called that night. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail, short, controlled, rehearsed. He spoke of misunderstanding, of pressure, of regret. Courtney deleted it without listening twice. 2 days later, a courier arrived with a final offer revised, urgent, generous. Money, property, silence. Rachel read it and looked up. Your call. Courtney stood and walked to the window. The city moved below, unconcerned, persistent. She thought of Italy, of the stone street at dawn, of the empty suitcase. No, she said. We proceed. Rachel nodded and returned the offer unopened. The decision changed something in Courtney, not outwardly, inwardly. A weight she hadn't named lifted completely, because now the outcome was no longer about winning. It was about ending the pattern. That evening, Courtney visited her mother. Linda Ramirez listened as Courtney summarized the case in 10 sentences or fewer. She nodded, asked one question, then reached for Courtney's hand. "I'm proud of you," Linda said. "Not because you fought, because you didn't fold." Courtney smiled faintly. "I learned from you," Linda squeezed her hand. "Then go build something better." On Monday morning, Courtney met with Rachel to discuss next steps beyond the case. "The trust," Rachel said, referring to the beneficiary confirmation. "You have options." Courtney considered them. Then she chose one. "I want to establish a fund," she said, "for women stranded abroad due to financial control, legal assistance, emergency access, documentation." Rachel nodded, already seeing the structure. "That's feasible." "It's necessary," Courtney said. "Too many people think silence means consent." Rachel smiled. "Let's do it right." As the paperwork began, Courtney felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest. The story that had begun with abandonment was ending with architecture, with systems built to prevent the same harm. That night, alone in her apartment, Courtney opened the fireproof box and removed the thin envelope about one last time. She read it not for reassurance, but for closure. Then she placed it back and locked the box. The past was documented. The future was hers to design. The collapse did not happen all at once. It happened in layers. First came the internal reckoning. Wright Holdings released a formal notice to employees acknowledging leadership changes and outlining interim controls. The language was careful legal scrubbed of emotion. But beneath the phrasing, the message was unmistakable. The company was distancing itself from Ethan Cole Wright as quickly as it could without tearing itself apart. Courtney read the notice on her phone while waiting for coffee. She didn't feel satisfaction. She felt alignment. Consequences matching actions, systems correcting themselves. Rachel Donovan called an hour later. "The board has appointed an interim CEO," she said. "External. No ties." Courtney nodded. "Good. They're also cooperating fully with regulators." "That's not generosity," Courtney replied. "That's survival." Rachel smiled. "Exactly." Ethan's unraveling accelerated after that. His personal accounts were frozen pending review. His corporate email access was terminated. His calendar, once packed with meetings that bent around his schedule, emptied. Invitations stopped coming. Calls went unanswered. Power didn't vanish with drama. It evaporated with silence. Vanessa Blake resurfaced briefly in the news cycle, not by name, but by implication. A former advisor was reported to be cooperating with investigators. The article noted her swift resignation and lack of public comment. Courtney didn't read past the headline. She had learned the difference between information and noise. The criminal referral moved slowly, as such things always did. Subpoenas were issued, requests made. No charges yet. But the machinery was in motion, and that mattered. One afternoon, Thomas Reed requested a final meeting. Rachel advised caution, but agreed to attend. Thomas looked thinner when he arrived. The confidence of proximity to power had drained from him, replaced by something more durable relief. "I've resigned," he said without preamble. Courtney regarded him calmly. "That was your choice." "Yes," Thomas replied. "And the right one." Rachel nodded. "You've preserved the record." Thomas exhaled. "That's all I wanted." When he left, Courtney felt no urge to judge him. He had chosen self-preservation over complicity. That line mattered. The civil case advanced toward resolution. With discovery complete and findings unfavorable, Ethan's counsel began signaling openness to terms, not silence for money this time, but compliance for mitigation. Rachel outlined the options. "He's offering to concede asset division on our terms," she said. No appeal, no delay. Courtney listened, and accountability. Financial and professional, Rachel replied. Criminal exposure remains independent. Courtney considered it. This wasn't forgiveness. It was closure with guardrails. Except, she said, with conditions. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Such as no non-disparagement clause. Courtney replied, truth stands. Rachel smiled. Agreed. The settlement was finalized within weeks. Assets were divided according to law, not leverage. Courtney received what was hers without spectacle. Ethan signed without ceremony. He did not look at her when he did. On the day the settlement closed, Courtney visited the office space Rachel had helped her secure, small, functional, deliberately unremarkable. Boxes lined the walls. A whiteboard leaned against a desk. This would be the operational base for the fund. Courtney wrote 3 words on the board in clean block letters: access. Record, exit. The fund launched quietly. No gala, no press release. Just a website, a phone number, and partnerships with consulates, legal clinics, and travel insurers. Emergency micro-grants. Rapid documentation assistance. Legal referrals. Within days, messages arrived. A woman in Lisbon locked out of her accounts after a surprise separation. A graduate student stranded in Tokyo after her sponsor withdrew support. A mother in Mexico City whose partner canceled return tickets mid-argument. Courtney read every intake summary herself during the first week. Not with anger, with purpose. One evening, as she reviewed a case file, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. She answered. "This is Marco," a voice said with a gentle Italian accent, "from the hotel." Courtney smiled softly. "Hello, Marco. I wanted to tell you," he continued, "we've updated our policies. We now have a protocol for situations like yours. Immediate consular contact. Temporary document release with police verification." Courtney closed her eyes briefly. "Thank you for telling me. You changed something," Marco said. Courtney shook her head, though he couldn't see it. We all did. After the call, Courtney sat back and let the quiet settle. Healing did not arrive as joy. It arrived as steadiness. She no longer scanned rooms for threat. She no longer flinched at notifications. The constant readiness that had lived in her muscles began to fade. One afternoon, Megan Foster requested a final comment for a follow-up piece about systems, not scandal. Courtney agreed to a brief statement. "What would you want people to understand?" Megan asked. Courtney considered the question. "That control often wears the costume of care," she said, "and that documentation is a form of dignity." The article ran the following week. It focused on process reform, corporate accountability, and the new fund's mission. Ethan's name appeared only once, buried in context. That was appropriate. On a quiet Saturday morning, Courtney packed a small bag and drove out of the city. She needed space, distance, a place without headlines or filings. She stopped at a coastal overlook and stood watching the water move, constant, indifferent, enduring. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "I'm proud of you. Dinner Sunday." Courtney typed back, "Yes." She didn't add explanations. She didn't need to. As she turned to leave, Courtney caught her reflection in the car window. She looked older, not aged, expanded, like someone who had carried weight and set it down properly. The story that began with abandonment had not ended in triumph. It had ended in structure. And structure, Courtney knew, was how safety lasted. The final reckoning did not happen in a courtroom packed with cameras. It happened in a hearing room designed for accuracy, not spectacle. Courtney Ramirez arrived early, as she always did now. She sat with her back straight, hands resting lightly on a legal pad she wouldn't need. Rachel Donovan reviewed notes beside her, calm and precise. Across the room, empty chairs waited investigators, compliance officers, representatives from regulatory agencies. This wasn't a trial. It was an accounting. Ethan Cole Wright arrived last. He looked composed, but the confidence he once wore like armor had thinned to a brittle shell. He sat without greeting, flanked by counsel, who no longer projected inevitability, only damage control. The presiding officer opened the session and outlined the scope: misuse of executive workflows, unauthorized asset rerouting, coercive procurement of consent, and obstruction of internal controls. Each point was stated plainly, stripped of drama. Evidence followed. Logs projected on a screen. Access times, IP addresses, authorization gaps. A call transcript where Ethan pressed Thomas Reed to fix the timing. Emails that framed urgency as necessity and necessity as entitlement. Ethan's counsel objected when they could. The objections were noted and overruled when they didn't matter. When Courtney was invited to speak, it was not as a victim, but as a witness of process. She stood. "I'm not here to describe how it felt," she said. "I'm here to describe what happened." She walked through the sequence without embellishment. Italy. The documents, the reversal, the lockout, the withheld passport. She did not accuse. She did not speculate. She did not raise her voice. When asked why she didn't challenge the document at the moment of signing, she answered once clearly, "Because I trusted the person presenting it." The room was quiet. Ethan's counsel attempted a reframing stress, misunderstanding, marital conflict. Courtney listened without interruption. When it was her turn to respond, she said only, "This marital conflict does not authorize executive shortcuts." The presiding officer nodded and moved on. Thomas Reed's affidavit was entered. Vanessa Blake's partial cooperation was noted. The compliance review concluded with recommendations, sanctions referrals, and permanent separation from executive authority. When the findings were read, the language was exacting. Ethan Cole Wright was found to have violated internal controls, misused emergency workflows, and engaged in conduct inconsistent with fiduciary responsibility. The sanctions were administrative, professional, and enduring. Removal was affirmed. Referral stood. Ethan did not speak when invited. He stared at the table, jaw tight, as if words might betray him further. The session adjourned without applause. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, not because justice was loud, but because it had been done carefully. Rachel placed a hand on Courtney's shoulder. "This part is over." Courtney nodded. "I know." They walked past the waiting press without stopping. Statements would be released through counsel. Questions could wait. The record was complete. That evening, Ethan made one last attempt. A message arrived from an unfamiliar number. No greeting, no apology. "You didn't have to destroy me." Courtney stared at the screen for a moment, then handed the phone to Rachel. "No response," Rachel said. "We preserve it." Courtney agreed. Silence was no longer personal. It was protocol. Days later, the arrest came not with spectacle, but with procedure. Charges related to financial misconduct and obstruction were filed. Ethan was taken into custody, quietly photographed, once released on conditions that would define his future in narrower terms. Courtney learned of it through a court alert, not a headline. She felt nothing sharp, only confirmation. The fund expanded its partnerships the same week. 2 consulates signed memoranda of understanding. A legal clinic agreed to prioritize cases involving financial control abroad. A travel insurer updated its disclosures. Small changes, structural ones. On a Friday afternoon, Courtney met with Rachel to close the last file. "This is the end of the matter," Rachel said, sliding the final document across the desk. "No appeals? No pending motions?" Courtney signed and handed the pen back. "Thank you." Rachel studied her for a moment. "You never once asked me how to hurt him." Courtney met her gaze. "Because that wasn't the point." Rachel smiled, genuine and rare. "You'll do well with what comes next." What came next was quieter. Courtney returned to the office and gathered the team, small, committed, careful. They reviewed cases, adjusted protocols, refined response times. They celebrated nothing loudly. They measured success by exits completed safely, by documents recovered by nights spent at home instead of airports. One afternoon, a message arrived from a woman in Lisbon, the first case Courtney had personally overseen. "I'm home. Thank you for believing me before anyone else did." Courtney closed her eyes and breathed. That night, she visited her mother for dinner. Linda Ramirez set the table without ceremony, poured water, and asked about the weather. After dessert, she reached across and took Courtney's hand. "You look peaceful." Courtney considered the word. I feel finished. Linda nodded. Good. Now live. On the drive home, Courtney passed a billboard advertising a conference Ethan once headlined. His face had been replaced with a new name. The city moved on the way cities always did, efficiently, without sentiment. Courtney didn't slow down, because the end of this story was not his fall. It was her return to authorship, to clarity, to a life no longer negotiated under someone else's access. The morning after the final file closed, Courtney Ramirez woke without an agenda. For the first time in months, there was no hearing to prepare for, no document to review, no call scheduled to contain damage. The quiet felt unfamiliar, not empty, but open. She lay still for a moment, letting the absence of urgency settle into her body. This, she realized, was what the end of a battle actually felt like. Not triumph, not relief, space. Courtney rose, made coffee, and stood by the window as the city moved into its day. People hurried past with their own concerns, unaware of the war that had concluded quietly in courtrooms and conference rooms. That anonymity felt like a gift. She dressed simply and drove to the office. The fun space was modest, but alive phones ringing softly, keyboards, clicking voices low and purposeful. Courtney moved through the room without announcement, checking in with each person, asking practical questions. How many intakes overnight? Any urgent travel holds? Any documents stuck in verification? This was where her energy went now. Not backward, forward. Late morning, she joined a call with a consulate liaison and a nonprofit partner. They finalized a rapid response protocol, temporary access grants, legal referrals, emergency lodging coordination. It wasn't dramatic work. It was effective work. When the call ended, Courtney leaned back and allowed herself one deep breath. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the court system, administrative final. No further actions required. She archived it. At noon, Megan Foster published the last piece. It wasn't about Ethan. It barely mentioned him. It focused on systems that fail quietly and the people who learn how to navigate them without spectacle. Courtney's name appeared once as the founder of a fund built from experience rather than vengeance. That was how she wanted it. In the afternoon, Courtney drove out of the city again, this time. Not to think, but to close a circle. She stopped at a small park overlooking the water. The wind carried the smell of salt and movement. She sat on a bench and let memory surface, not the worst moments, but the earliest ones. The trust she'd offered freely. The version of herself that believed love and access were the same thing. She didn't judge that woman anymore. She thanked her, because without that trust, she wouldn't have learned the cost of unexamined control. And without that lesson, she wouldn't have built something that would outlast her pain. Courtney's phone buzzed again. A video call from Marco and Elena. She answered, smiling. "We saw the update," Marco said. "The fund." Elena nodded enthusiastically. "People are talking about it." Courtney laughed softly. "Good things, I hope." "Important things," Marco replied. "We wanted you to know we've shared your protocol with other hotels." Quietly, Courtney's chest tightened, not with sadness, but with recognition. This was how change actually moved. From one small decision to another. "Thank you," she said, "for believing me when it mattered." After the call ended, Courtney sat for a long time watching the water shift and reform itself endlessly. She thought of Ethan once, not with anger, not with pity, but with distance. His story would continue in a narrower frame, defined by consequences he could no longer outrun. That chapter was closed. She wasn't carrying it anymore. That evening, Courtney cooked dinner for herself. She ate slowly without distraction. She washed the dishes immediately afterward, enjoying the simplicity of finishing what she started. Before bed, she opened the fireproof box one last time. Inside lay the documents that had once felt like lifelines, reports, confirmations, timelines. She reviewed them not for reassurance, but for acknowledgement. This was the record. It existed. It was complete. She closed the box and locked it. Some stories don't need to be retold. They need to be stored properly and released. Courtney turned off the light and lay down her mind clear. Tomorrow would be busy. There were cases to review, people to help, systems to refine. But tonight, there was nothing she needed to prove. She had survived abandonment without becoming bitter. She had pursued justice without losing herself. She had chosen power that didn't need witnesses. And in doing so, she had built a life that no one else could quietly take away again. Some betrayals don't arrive screaming. They arrive with paperwork smiles and locked doors. This story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when a woman stops explaining herself to people who benefit from her confusion and starts documenting instead. When she chooses clarity over chaos, process over panic, dignity over drama. Courtney didn't win because she was louder. She won because she was precise. In real life, power often hides behind convenience. Someone else handling things for you, someone else controlling access for your own good. And the moment you question it, you're told you're emotional, difficult, or overreacting. The truth is simple. If you don't have access, you don't have security. If you don't have records, you don't have leverage. And silence is only weakness when it's fear, never when it's strategy. If this story resonated with you, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Your voice matters here. And if you believe in stories about quiet strength, earned justice, and rebuilding without bitterness, don't forget to subscribe. More stories are coming, and they're for people who understand that real power doesn't shout.